Well, for those who may know me, I'm a bit more of a wine drinker than a beer drinker, but I have been very intrigued, and particularly what on earth is a hazy? I might be able to find out in this next episode where we are talking to plant and food researchers, hop breeding scientists that are pioneering a release of a series of highly successful seedless triploid, I hope I've got that correct, cultivars. Now, it's all to do with flavour to hit into the big fashion, which is craft beer. The breeding program focuses on developing high-performing bittering-type hops and novel aromatic-type hops that will be giving these unique flavours to beers in demand all around the world. Now, Plant and Food's 70 years of work with hops is paying off. And we certainly know that Kiwis love their beer, with over 200 craft breweries nationwide now. Can you believe it? And the experimentation of beer, everyone's wanting to have a different flavour experience, of course, as their point of difference. Someone who will be able to tell me what a hazy is and many other things about flavour components within hops is plant and food research scientist and devoted hop breeder Kerry Templeton. I suppose we better start with that as a first question. What makes a hazy?
Well, what makes a hazy IPA is it's a mixture of the hops and the yeast, combination of hops and the yeast, and the grain that goes in as well. So the beer's two main ingredients other than water is malted barley and your hops. And hazy IPAs, they often put in oats and wheat as well to get a bit of haze in them. It adds flavour. It's fairly new to the scene. I say fairly new, 2 to 3 years in New Zealand anyway. And
when you talk about it as a scene, it certainly is. It's like the fashion industry you've described it as, But the thing is, it's taken a read 10 years to breed a new hop variety. So how, as a plant breeder of hops in New Zealand, do we keep up with this rapid rate of change and demand?
That's a really good question, and something we're always asking ourselves, and we're always crystal ball gazing to try and identify the latest trends in the industry. You can look to the North American market to some extent. They have a few years ahead of us generally, although in some trends we're really right behind them. Other trends we're a bit further away, and that's where we aim to be breeding hops that would fit those markets. Different, because it's, as you say, it's a fashion industry. It's always changing. We're aiming for different, so we're looking for hops with a difference. Well, that was the slogan a few years ago, but it's still probably apt today.
What is the process to harvest hops from planting? In terms of at what age?
Hops, first year plants. So you can plant a plant in the ground in spring, and you'll get hops off it in the first year. It won't be a full crop. So hops are a perennial crop.
Right.
They'll grow every year, but the first year crop will be about a 65 to 75% crop, and your second year crop would be 85 to 95% of full production. Third year on should be full production. Second year will be very close.
The reason I ask that is there seems to be a lot of capital outlay, especially when you're converting dairy farms through Motueka into hop farms, and that return on investment if different varietals are coming through all the time.
Yeah, well, as I said, because they can get a crop off the first year, they can change relatively quickly. Hops are reasonably easy to propagate. They're clonally propagated, and they just take a cutting, stick in the ground, it'll grow. Stick in a pot, it'll grow. And you can get, each plant, you can probably get 50 to 100 cuttings off, so you can see how it can multiply out very quickly. You don't need a lot of hops to suddenly 100,000 hops.
Yeah.
And you're in the business, really.
And when it comes to New Zealand capitalising on flavour, making it unique to New Zealand, I mean, what's the similarities to te wā that wine has in different areas, such as more cold-tolerant crops in Central Otago up to Taupua?
you're getting into an area there which I have an opinion on. I don't know if it's
love it. Love opinions.
I think so. Terroir in hops isn't probably quite the same as terroir in grapes, in that because hops are a very processed crop. There's the harvesting. You've got to harvest them on the right date. You've got to run them through a machine. You dry them. The different kilning systems have different just the how do you describe idiosyncrasies of the different farms. How they all slightly different. You probably get that can have probably a bigger influence than the actual location you grow them. For instance, if you take a rockstar hop like Nectaron, if you grew it in Motueka region or grew it in Central Otago, it's probably going to taste very similar. And if the differences you get may not be from the fact it was grown in Central Otago, it could be from the fact that the people down there dried it in a slightly different system. So, even if they're all manufactured the same, even if a grower harvests it one day later or earlier, that can affect the flavour. So there's a lot to going into it.
And the work that Plant and Food have been doing over 70 years is playing off now globally. What type of industry has the hop breeding been for New Zealand?
The hop industry, the breeding program, I guess, started out of a need to breed some disease resistance for a root rot that they had in the 1950s. And they quickly got on top of that and solved that problem. And ever since then, we've been breeding, like you say, it's a fashion industry. We've been targeting what the brewing industry wants. Our clients are usually growers, so where the grower tells us what they're able to sell and we breed for those targets. But it's been chasing those targets. So for a long time, alpha acids, which is the bittering component in hops, was the big thing to chase. And then some point in the 80s, they started chasing aroma hops, and now we've moved into what we'd call flavour hops, or they're not aroma hop. The description of aroma hop often defines it as a hop that is similar to a old world Czech or German hop. They call them fine. They call them what do they call them? They're old world hops. Whereas what we're breeding now with flavour hops are totally different. We don't really focus much on the alpha acids or the making them look like German or European hops. We're going down our own track now. We've decided to forge our own path and make the flavour our own. The flavour that we can get out of the New Zealand hops, our own thing.
That's super cool, and there must be more to the story of a New Zealand hop for a craft beer brand. Environmental sustainability, carbon neutral is a huge claim that people are wanting, especially in the beer world. They're chasing for their brand reputation. What work can you do in plant breeding to, breed in things like disease resistance so that you don't need as many chemicals and other environmental aspects that position New Zealand well for the future?
Well, one of the cool things about hops, we don't really have any major diseases other than the one they originally had, the root rot. We haven't got any fungal diseases. So in North America and Europe, they're fighting downy and powdery mildew problems, and they, I believe, have to spray quite heavily to control those diseases. We don't have any of those in New Zealand. In general, the only issue in New Zealand is two-spotted mite, which you can release a predatory mite to control. So hops can be fairly spray-free. The only thing you'd spray for in New Zealand would be two-spotted mite, and I believe that's fairly rare within the industry these days. They use predatory mites, which are biological control, to control it. So it's we are looking at disease resistance as a way of preempting the chance. If these diseases got to New Zealand, we aren't specifically breeding for it, but we're looking at using DNA technology to identify some genes involved in disease resistance to implement in our program.
Yeah, just use another example of gene technology such as CRISPR being of benefit going forward to New Zealand's brand in the hop world. Kerry, for those who are interested in farming and growing hops, what sort of return per hectare and sort of its future is it looking like? Or is it still very localised in areas such as Motueka? Or is there starting to see a bit of a spread across the country?
So at the moment, it's localised within the, Nelson region. It's within an hour drive of the Motueka, Nelson area region. There are people trialling hops in the Central Otago region, I believe relatively successfully. I can't see any reason, honestly, you couldn't grow hops probably from the Central Plateau, North Island, all the way to the bottom of the South Island. Only issue I could see with that is having access to the knowledge on how to grow them. It's a fairly specialist crop to grow, and without that in-depth knowledge of the crop, you're going to struggle to find people to actually, you're going to struggle to get your orchard to perform, your garden to perform optimally, and it's a big learning curve.
And I suppose once people are in the hop world, they become pretty dedicated, as you have been as a hop breeder, devoted as well as being a scientist for plant and food research. Thank you so much, Kerry Templeton, for taking the time to round out this week's Changemaker show here on Ceres Country.